सबसे बड़ा फंडामेंटल राइट है वोट के जरिए।
And the second message which I want,
और यकीनन आप लोगों ने
So assalamu alaikum everyone. So we are here at USF Marshall Center और यहाँ पे पाकिस्तान से एक बहुत ही मशहूर और मारूफ शख्सियत आई हैं और let me tell you he is a politician from Pakistan. तो अभी हम आगे जा रहे हैं और आपको सारा जाके इवेंट दिखाते हैं। लाजम तैयार हो?
मैं एक्साइटेड हूँ मिलने के लिए और आप लोग को भी दिखाते हैं।
So we have tea here. ये देखिए यहाँ पे ये दी चीनी। लाजम चाय पीनी है आपने?
नहीं
चाय का कोई
काफ़ी
रहा
गर्मी है, ठंड
गर्मी है?
लगेगी।
अच्छा चाय यहाँ पे है और आपको साथ दिखाते हैं तो स्नैक्स वगैरह। इस साइड पे पानी, अगर आपको पानी की ज़रूरत है तो पानी भी सारा प्रोवाइडेड है। इसके बाद अगर यहाँ से आप अपना बॉल लें, साथ ही आप अपना ले लेंगे टिशू। उसके बाद सारा अपना सामान पूरा करके उसके बाद आगे से थोड़ा खा पी भी लें।
खा पियेंगे भी, साथ खाएंगे भाई।
और अगर आप सुनाएं ठीक ठाक
अस्सलाम वालेकुम Pakistan, how's everything?
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह
We're here at PTR rally today. Inshallah, we're going to be talking about human rights.
इंशाल्लाह।
So come join us if you are able to. Assalamu alaikum.
थैंक यू सो मच।
Go ahead.
हमारी साइड में चना चाट है।
मैं तो चना चाट खा रहा हूँ। मैं
फिलहाल सब लेंगे थी कुकीज़। हमारी साइड पे केक्स हैं। ला पिज़्ज़ा लेना? पिज़्ज़ा भी है। So now we're heading inside.
सबसे बड़ा फंडामेंटल राइट है वोट के जरिए अपनी हुकूमत मुंतखब करना, ना तो किसी और कर्जा आज कर्जा करके बैठे हो। शुक्रिया।
And on behalf of the Friends of Pakistan and my fellow organizers, I would like to welcome all of you to the event which we have named the Seminar on Democracy and Future of Human Rights in Pakistan. Without any warrants or due process, beat up his wife and abducted the father and his 19-year-old daughter. Both the father and the daughter were incarcerated illegally for the next 2 weeks. And finally, when they were released, we heard the horror story that the father was stripped naked in front of his 19-year-old daughter. And the daughter was stripped naked in front of her father. This is not daughter of Lahore. She is not the daughter of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. She is the daughter of Pakistan. And we hear stories like this, stories of torture, horror, no regard for rule or law or constitution from all over the country, but especially from the province of Punjab. Thousands have been incarcerated without any due process. Children as young as 10 years old have been arrested just for their crime was they are carrying the flag of PTI. And what they have done to the political leadership of PTI, this has never happened in any civilized society before, unless that country is in a state of war. Pakistan is not in a state of war. We cannot fight alone. What they did to the political leaders, they destroyed their businesses, they destroyed their homes, they attacked their families, abducted them, and then what they did to our national hero, a great leader just not of Pakistan, but of the entire Muslim Ummah, Mr. Imran Khan. I would like to now introduce the panelists. I would like to request Sania Munir and Iman Ahmad to come to the stage and introduce our fellow panelists. Thank you.
is Sunny Munir.
My name is Himat Ahmed.
And we're here to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Mr. Uzair Yunus. He is the director of the Pakistan Initiative at the Atlantic Council think tank in Washington and vice president at the Asia Group. He was also director at the Albright Stonebridge South Asia practice. We would like to welcome Mr. Yunus to Tampa. Thank you, Mr. Yunus. Our next speaker is Dr. Hassan Abbas. He is a distinguished professor of international security studies and chair of the Department of Regional Analytical Studies at the U.S. National Defense University. Additionally, he was a distinguished Quasi-Azam Chair Professor at Columbia University. Dr. Abbas also held a fellowship at Harvard Law School and Asia Society in New York. We would like to welcome Dr. Abbas to the panel. The next panelist we have here with us today is Dr. Kamar Huda. He is a Michael Paul Distinguished Visiting Professor of International Affairs at the United States Naval Academy. Formerly, Dr. Huda was a Senior Policy Advisor for the U.S. Department of State Secretary's Office for Regional and Global Affairs, where he focused on civil society, religious communities, and diplomacy with non-governmental organizations. He was also selected as one of the world's 500 most influential Muslims from 2016 to 2023. Thank you, Dr. Huda, for joining us today. Our next speaker is Mr. Arif Ansar. He is the CEO and Chief Analyst at Polytech Washington-based think tank. Mr. Arif has over 20 years of consulting experience with various branches of the U.S. government, including the USA Department of State, U.S. Geological Survey, and the Department of Defense. Thank you, Mr. Arif Ansar, for joining us in Tampa.
Our next speaker is Mr. Mohit Pirzada. Mr. Mohit Pirzada is a well-known Pakistani political commentator, geostrategic analyst, and television and news journalist. He had his MPBS degree from Alham Akbar Medical College in Lahore, and then he was a Britannia Chevening Scholar at the London School of Economics. He also received his political science MSc in media and internet regulation from Columbia University. We would like to welcome Mr. Mohit Pirzada to Tampa. Our next speaker is Dr. Shehbaz Gill. Dr. Gill has been the Professor of Business Administration at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Gill was appointed and acted as a spokesperson for Prime Minister Imran Khan, and before that, he was a spokesperson for the Chief Minister of the Punjab province. We would like to welcome Dr. Gill to Tampa. Our next guest is Mr. Salman Ahmad, who is a very well-known Pakistani musician and founder of the internationally renowned rock band Janoon. Mr. Ahmad is also a physician by profession, a political activist, and professor at the City University of New York. Additionally, he has served as the United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for the HIV/AIDS program in South Asia. We would like to welcome Mr. Salman Ahmad to Tampa, and thank you again to all of our panelists for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sandhya and Himat. I would like to request our panelists to please join us on the stage now. And Mohit bhai, Mohit Pirzada, Kamar Huda, Hassan Abbas, and Uzair Yunus. So this session, the first session that we are going to start now, will start with a speech by Mr. Mohit Pirzada, as he will share his thoughts about why democracy is so challenged in Pakistan. And after that, Mr. Kamar Huda will help me conduct the question and answer session.
Assalamu alaikum to all of you. I am thankful to all of you, to Dr. Muni, to Dr. Kisar, Sadia, to Dr. Kiran, and Dr. Tariq, and to all organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here today. I'm also very happy that this is a university setting. Fortunately, I think that the students are not back till 28th of August. I was very eager to see more students, but I think that the university setting actually sends a sort of a message which is very important. The theme that has been given to me by Dr. Munir, the organizers, this panel is that why the democracy repeatedly fails in Pakistan. A few words to explain who I am and why I would like to make these assertions, and why I think that I have a certain kind of confidence in making these assertions. I am a television journalist. I have also written extensively. I've been writing for the past 20 years, and I have been published in almost all Pakistani major newspapers and international publications. I've been a columnist with Khaleej Times. I've written for Al Jazeera. But I have been sort of a living historian of Pakistan in the sense that since 2005, when I started television, this is almost 18 years, and I moved from, and that was in London, I moved to Pakistan in 2007. From 2005 till this time period, before I had to run from Pakistan, I became proclaimed offender and terrorist. I have been conducting at least 4 programs a week, at times 5 programs a week. At times during the elections, during this crisis, I've been conducting programs, television programs, 7 days a week. But not programs, special broadcasts that will continue for 10 hours. So what's the significance of this is that I enjoyed tremendous access and interaction with all class of Pakistani decision makers, the political party leaders from all political parties, whether they were top political leadership, second-tier political leadership, third-degree political leadership, city leadership. Similarly, I enjoyed an unfettered access to the Corps of Diplomats, whether it's Pakistan Foreign Office or the US Embassy, the British High Commission, Indian High Commission, very important in terms of understanding issues in Pakistan. And I had access with not only with the Prime Minister's office, the Chief Minister's office, I also had access to the top of the military decision makers, the top of the intelligence. And on the basis of this, I can make certain kind of assertions. When I look at many writings in the last 6 months from Pakistani major English publications, also on the Twitter, from people from parts of think tanks and universities, the impression is created is that what's happening in Pakistan is a routine affair. There's nothing unusual about it. And this has been happening before. I mean, military has been bringing the governments, the military has been moving the governments. I mean, what if the Imran Khan government has been removed the way it has been removed? Nawaz government was also removed. Benazir Bhutto was also assassinated, and these things have been happening in Pakistan history. So it's just the usual, normal routine of the Pakistani history. I would assert that the present crisis in Pakistan, of whose manifestation, the crisis manifestation which we started to see from somewhere in the March, or let's say the government was removed on 9th April 2022, 16 months. This is not the usual crisis of Pakistan. This is not something that has been happening in Pakistan. This is something very new. This is something very unusual. For instance, while Dr. Munir's voice choked when he was reminding you some of the events that have happened in the last 16 months. In the last, barring the exception of the former East Pakistan and Bangladesh, even including the tragic events of 1977-79, Pakistani authorities have never raided thousands of homes. They have not broken the doors and the gates. We forget about what happened after 9th May. People have forgotten that on 24th of May 2022, when Imran Khan had announced his long march from Lahore, according to the given figures of the Punjab police, 4,400 houses and farmhouses in Punjab alone were raided in the middle of the night. Not on 25th May, but 24th May. When people refer to 25th May 2022, they actually forget that since the party, the People's Party, the Tehreek-e-Insaf had actually announced a long march from KP and Punjab towards Islamabad, in order to fail the long mark, not to confront it on the roads, but to fail it as a preventive measure in one of the most unusual events in the history of Pakistan. Well, such events have taken place in former East Pakistan. We don't really have a good recollection of it. But not in the entire 75 years of the history of West Pakistan, which is now Pakistan. We had ever seen or heard of an event in which 4,400 houses were raided in one night across Punjab. And people were arrested, humiliated. I mean, these included ex-judges like Nasara, Himat. People were arrested. The children were beaten. The women were insulted and humiliated, you know. So much so that, you know, there were instances when women had their phones in their hands and they were saying that stop. The doors were broken in the middle of the night after 2 a.m. They had their mobile phones in their hand and they said, I'm going to record you, stop. And the phones were snatched. This kind of brutality, this kind of insult, this kind of humiliation of the woman in Pakistan has never been seen before. This Dr Shehbaz Gill, I haven't seen. Where is he? Oh, he's not, he will probably arrive later, right? You know, the way in August 2022, Dr Shehbaz Gill was abducted illegally, stripped naked, electrocuted, kept in jail for 45 days. I mean, one example. What happened to Senator Azam Sawati, the way his videos were made and sent to his family and his wife, I mean, to show the power of the state. Jamil Farooqi, a television anchor of a mainstream television anchor, was just simply arrested from his outside his office, stripped, hung upside down, stripped naked. Director news of ARY Ahmad Yusuf was his home and gates were broken after midnight, 2 a.m. in the night, arrested in front of his daughters, stripped naked, hung upside down, stripped naked, you know, for the whole night. This is not the Pakistan, you know. Yes, I agree. These selective events might have happened during Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's Dalai camps, but with few people, maybe with 24 people. These events must have happened and happened with, say, a few hundred people between 1977-79 time period, General Ziaul-Haq's martial law, especially when he was executing Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and people came out to protest. But these did not define the norm and culture of the Pakistani exercise of authority. Yes, now, it is another thing which needs to be understood from the perspective and lens of the political science. Shit happens in the periphery of a state. Imran Khan as the enemy. They think that somehow or the other, if they manage to control Imran Khan, manage to bottle him up, or maybe force him to surrender, or they eliminate him, as of course an attempt was made to eliminate him on 3rd November 2022. That was not a joke. I mean, he could have done it. Right? And in a few doctors, his doctor, I think Faisal, showed me a diagram and he made it, that how his femoral artery was missed by just 2 centimeters. So if a femoral artery had blown off, there would have not been any possibility of applying a tourniquet in Wazirabad, and he would have died. So I mean, of course, he could have died. So the establishment identifies Imran Khan responsible for all the challenges and the problems they face. But it's actually not Imran Khan. Imran Khan has become the agent and the symbol of this change. The change has to do with 2 or 3 factors. Pakistan's demographic change. The census says it's 241 million. We never know it's 241 million or it's 250 million. But the population has grown. The second factor is the young in this population are almost 65% to maybe 68% of them are under 35 years of age. Second factor. The third factor is this: there is a unprecedented income inequality. This kind of income inequality was not, you really need an economist to understand that. But the Pakistan of 1950s to 1990s onward didn't have this kind of income inequality. People might have looked poor. They were not short of the caloric value. They were not short of the ability to feed themselves. They were still eating properly. They had the proper protein and whatever. So the massive income inequality is another factor. They don't have meaningful jobs. This huge young youth force doesn't have meaningful job that can occupy their minds, that can give them a sense of reason, an identity to life, a sense of definition of what life means for them. That is another problem. Establishment's old utility of 1960s, first against the Soviet Union, then in Afghanistan wars has ended. Now, establishment's utility appears for the West to be able to tame and control Pakistani population, to subdue them, to submit to an Indian design on the region, so that India can actually stand up and can face up to the rise of China, because according to the best political scientists, the only real way of containing the rise of China is actually letting India develop and become as big as a regional power as China is. And without Pakistan being a cooperative framework to the Indian economy or to the Indian system, this is not going to happen. This is also a factor. So India's rise is very important. End of step 2. So last word. West rising fear of China, China's presentation of the Belt Road Initiative and its component as CPEC is also an important factor. Then the China-India conflict of June 2020 unnerved India and India's supporter, where India complained to its supporters that it has been locked into a two-front situation with two nuclear states, China on one side and Pakistan on the other side. All these factors in my analysis has made Pakistani establishment extremely insecure about its own future. It is trying to redefine itself, find a utility and a purpose of its existence, which in the political science we call as a raison d'être. And that is why the panic is such that they not only have controlled all Pakistani expression within Pakistan, they're trying to suppress all Pakistani expression in North America, diasporas, us sitting over here. So I will take your questions whenever I get the opportunity. Thank you, Sean.
As they say, nothing erodes hope like injustice. And today we are all gathered here because we believe a great injustice is being done in Pakistan. But for now, we still have hope. We believe those in power will realize that their loyalties to the country are far more sacred than their loyalties to any political party.
Thank you very much. Honored and delighted to be here to respond. 3 minutes. First and foremost, I think before answering the question, I would like to pay tribute to all the pictures that are here and all the people in the history of Pakistan who have sacrificed their lives from day one. Don't forget those who had walked barefooted in Pakistan 75 years ago. Many a times there were people who pushed back authoritarian regimes. They paid with their lives. Let's salute all of these figures here and salute all those who have given their lives and their honor and their blood and toil to the cause of Pakistan. The idea that, in the words of Ehtizaz Ehsan, धरती होगी माँ के जैसी हर शहरी से प्यार करेगी हर शहरी से
Thank you for that framework, Dr. Abbas. I'll build on it. And first of all, thanks to the community here for having us and for this opportunity to speak. I'll involve the crowd a bit before I move on. Again, salute to all of the people whose pictures are up here, many countless who are not named here. But I'll ask, how many of you have heard the name Hidayatur Rahman? Nobody. How many of you have heard the name Jan Mohammad Meher? Nobody. You have? Okay. So Jan Mohammad Meher, on August 14th, the report runs in Dawn, is a journalist in Sindh, was shot dead in the face multiple times for a crime of reporting the truth from Sakhat in Sindh. He didn't feature in our conversation so far. Hidayatur Rahman has a terror case against him. He's a political leader out of Gwadar. He was in prison for 5 months until the Supreme Court of Pakistan this year released him on bail. His crime, demanding clean drinking water for the people of Gwadar. Why was he demanding clean drinking water for the people of Gwadar? Because at that same time, many politicians across the aisle in Pakistan would go to Gwadar, take an amazing selfie. Many of you have seen those selfies in a rich, lush, green cricket stadium in Gwadar that looks amazing. Now imagine what you would go through if over here in the university campus of Tampa there is an amazing field while your home has arsenic-laden water coming in. Hidayatur Rahman is not featured here. And I think the awakening we are having as a community, particularly as a community of American Pakistanis, is not complete until we engage and understand of the shit, quote unquote, that happens in the periphery, because that's the only way to build a coalition. And then there are instances that we need to understand historical and social about why this happens, because again, many of you are doctors. If you have a poor history taking of a patient, odds are that patient will flatline on your bench. So we need to take some history taking. I'll run through quickly. One core reason why democracy does not thrive in Pakistan is because Pakistan as a society, or Pakistan as we know today, not East Pakistan, was one of the last regions to be engaged or annexed into the British Raj in 1849. By then, it had been almost 100 years that Bengal had been annexed. So the culture of democracy, of the British institution building, had much deeper roots in places like Delhi, United Provinces, Bengal, than it did in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. That then meant that when independence was achieved, Pakistan was sort of struggling to define its own democratic experiment, which then led to the fact that while India had a constitution in 1948, Pakistan only had one in 1956, and by 58, the first martial law had come into being. Many people, especially older people, say Ayub ka zamana bada acha tha. I'm 35 years old. I remember a lot of people, many of you may have heard them say, Musharraf ka zamana bada acha tha. Well, I grew up in Karachi. Musharraf ka zamana bilkul acha nahi tha. It destroyed my city. But that was periphery, and shit was happening in the periphery. Then you come down and you fast forward to the Muslim League itself and its political culture. This is, I'm talking about the post-independence Muslim League. It had 503 core members of the party. 163 of them were landlords, out of which 51 from Punjab, which then meant that the goal of land reforms never happened. And that's directly connected to a democratic experiment in any society, because if you don't have security of property and you don't own property, odds are the culture of democracy at the grassroots level will not take place. This is just democratic literature, what teaches us. So you ran into that problem, and then you had martial law, and then you had Sito Sendo, the global Cold War, the Afghan Jihad, Zia-ul-Haq, in the 80s, brutality was ongoing, again on the periphery, Punjab did not care. And then we fast forward into the Musharraf War on Terror, and again, a politician out of Punjab, a son of out of Pakistan, a son of the soil, whether we may like him or not, or his political views or not, was bombed by taxpayer money bought planes in Balochistan, and that birthed an insurgency. Again, stuff was happening in the periphery, nobody cared. And then we fast forward into the democratic transition, a coup attempt in 2014 that failed. Many people don't know about it, but it was a coup attempt in 2014. It's described in great detail in Shuja Nawaz's book, The Battle for Pakistan, and we have today. And I think that's the history that we need to understand, that the history of democratic backsliding or authoritarianism, or whatever term you may want to use, may look unprecedented at this point in time because it has come into the core of the country. But for the periphery, this has been going on for a long, long, long time. And so we have to understand that part. Finally, on the societal elements, as I said, security of life, property, and contract is core to any democracy. Pakistan has none. Life is insecure, property is insecure, and contracts, the ultimate contract, the constitution, has been torn away by people who say it's just a piece of paper, and we think was zamana bada acha tha unka. So we have to look deep inside into ourselves of what's going on. I'll give a couple of statistics about life. 30%, according to the Pakistan Demographic Health Survey, which is one of the most detailed surveys in Pakistan, doctors use it quite a lot, doctors that I know in Pakistan. 30% of women say that they experience physical violence since turning the age of 15 in Pakistan. 60% of them never tell anyone. I see a lot of women here. Odds are many of you, or many of people that you know, unfortunately, it sickens me to say that, are part of that data. But we don't talk about it as a community. We talk about the security of property. Beria, a town run by Malik Riaz, who I refer to as the fountain of corruption in Pakistan, has alliances with every single major political party in Pakistan. When he stole land from poor peasants in rural Sindh, the Supreme Court said, pay 400 billion rupees in fines and it's okay, your crime is forgiven. That money never really came back. But B, is that the way we want justice in a democratic country? I don't think so. So we need to ask ourselves about politicians. Why do you build alliances with the fountain of corruption in a country? How does that serve the cause of democracy? And then contracts. Talk about constitution. And I will keep repeating and harping on this point because many in the diaspora refer to the Musharraf era as something of a good time. It's like a doctor saying, well, you have lung cancer, but you smoke 20 cigarettes a day, it's okay. इलाज हो जाएगा, कीमो करा लो. नहीं होगा इलाज, आप बीमार हैं, आप सिगरेट पिए चले जा रहे हैं. मुशर्रफ का ज़माना अच्छा नहीं. That really damaged Pakistan. So when we look at all of this in this context, the historical and social context, it's pessimistic in the sense that it's not going to get a whole lot better in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It took us 75 years to come here. It's going to take another 75 years to get out of this mess. But the first step we need to take as a community is do some stock taking and build some coalitions and reach out to the Baloch, reach out to the MQM family. Over 500 of them are still missing in Karachi. And say, you know what? We ignored you because you weren't part of the core. You were the periphery. Shit was happening in the periphery. But now we understand, so let's build a coalition. Until and unless we don't do that, this whole idea of strengthening Pakistani democracy is just a facade and it's never going to be realized. Thank you.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I'll take a little bit of a different approach than Uzair and Abbas and Mueed and contend that yes, we focus a lot on the internal dynamics that has been transpiring and you know what happened, which institution did what did the military do, etc., etc. But I think one of the important things is to understand the aspect of change in the internal dynamics of a country, society, etc., culture, religion, and the change that's occurring outside, in the neighborhood and in the globe. And both impact each other. Which one does more is up to discussion, but I think more will say that it's the global dynamics that impact the local dynamics. And if you were to look at the history of Pakistan, you would see that most of these questions, when democracy got derailed or some major upheaval happened in the politics of Pakistan, it was because something major was happening in the global politics. Whether it was the Iranian Revolution, Cold War, something was happening, or more recently, war against extremism, and what was the local response? So obviously there are challenges in the global environment and there are challenges in the internal environment, and the society try to come up with a response to this change, to adapt, if you may say. What is that response? And who is developing that response is more important as well. What are the trends that are happening globally? So if we are unable to frame or identify the trends, then it may be that the response is inaccurate as well. But it is in this context that we see that even the present derailment of democracy, happened in an important juncture in global politics. Dr. Mueed pointed out the change in the global balance of power. It's a big thing. How does it impact Pakistan? And what is the response? And that's not just one aspect. There is the political, economic, and security aspect of this dynamic. There's the societal. And not only that, then who decides that, like I said, what the response is going to be. How is this consensus going to be built? It's not just me that's going to decide, okay, this is what we're going to do. Or PPP decided, or the military decided. And this is where Pakistan, I think, is failing again and again, going with the tensions between civil-military relations because of the inability to properly develop a response, and more importantly, to develop consensus around it. Because without public consensus, it's not going to go anywhere. So I'll answer that question, Dr. Huda, in this context, that democracy, why do we need democracy? For what? What does democracy do? And I'll stop it.
Thank you. To continue this issue, I have a two-part question for the panelists here. And so the first part is built on what both you, all three have said, in a sense, is stock taking stock and reflecting. Nelson Mandela, the leader of South Africa, was charged when he was arrested on terrorism charges because he was working for the African National Congress. He was then sent to jail for 29 years. We all know his story. He came out and was elected president. But the most interesting thing is that while his first ordinance for election as president, he said, we want a Truth and Reconciliation Tribune, TRC Commission. Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this commission actually is a textbook study in conflict studies around the world and how South Africa dealt with the racial apartheid, economic divisions, social divisions, etc., that they experienced through apartheid. My first question is, does Pakistan need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for dealing with the partition of 3.5 million people who died during partition, and all the wars afterwards, and all the other wars, and all these other martyrs that have happened? How come nothing like this has happened in Pakistan when we want to reflect on our brutal history, where we have a Truth Commission addressing who's behind this? That's part one. Second one is the question of, again, back to civil society. When we discuss power and authority, this is what we're talking about. Power and authority, Dr. Pirzad describes it, power and authoritarianism, power and the change of power. When we do a power analysis of Pakistan elite of military, businesses, elite businesses, civil society, whatever, we do a power analysis, there's a constant negotiation between these several groups. My question to you is this negotiation pivoting as we speak? It's in political science called power transition. Are we seeing a moment of power transition where members of all these different camps of the elite who are running Pakistan, here, inside Pakistan, and those who influence Pakistan, is there a current power transitional period as we speak? I pose that to each of our panelists. Dr. Abbas.
Thank you very much for this excellent question. I'll be brief, and I'm first on the reconciliation point. I think it's a very, very important point. Even if 75 years later, even if what happened in the partition is too old, although that is a necessity if you want better relations with India. Both India and Pakistan will have to reconcile. But more later, which is still possible, is about what happened in Bangladesh. And for Pakistan to start off, to actually offer a genuine, sincere apology to Bangladesh. And that will start a reconciliation. I am saying more about this. Just after this, I'm flying straight to Dhaka. And I was looking at the history and the narratives and talking to some of the Bengalis who have invited us there for a conference. And I realized, I remember, I'll just give you one anecdote. I was studying in UK, and many years ago, studying actually for a human rights law degree. I was a police officer in Pakistan. Maybe not very popular, but I still am. I feel honored, depending on who you are and what you want to do. I feel honored that I wore that uniform, because I still believe there are many people who wear uniform, whether military or police, who stand up for justice, who stand up for integrity. So I must acknowledge, not to throw in sweeping statements can be problematic, throwing the whole institution into the carpet. Somebody said to me, "ये mention ना करना कि तुम police में थे." नहीं, I am very proud कि मैं police में. One anecdote is, I was studying, so we invited our next door neighbor, who was the son of the Chief Justice of Bangladesh. He came and he was late for an event me and my wife had prepared for him. We were students of LLM in 2001. And he came kind of with tears in his eyes. He said, "You know, I told my parents that I'm going to house of a Pakistani next door." And he said, "You know, this is the first time I had a 30-minute talk." He said, "My grandmother was raped by Pakistan at the time of partition." He said, "My father has told me not to come to me." So the point is, we are proud Pakistanis, but in our history we have been very unfair to many people. So that reconciliation should start from there. That's more recent. That as a state, as a society, you can go to Bengalis and say, "You know, we are very, very sorry." But this is a great point. Unless that reconciliation happens, because looking at the other Pakistanis today in political terms, let me be bold. I mean, I know most of you are probably PTI supporters. Great, salute to you. It's a democratic order. You are going through tough times. But we need to honor, irrespective of our political affiliations, also to rethink and step back. There will have to be some reconciliation between major political parties at some point. Not accepting and acknowledging by saying, okay, you did wrong, there was corruption, I'm ready to look the other way. No, not on those principles. I think that is a principal stand of the party. I understand and honor that and respect that. But at some point, the leadership will have to start. Don't expect this from grassroots. Ideally, it should come from grassroots. Some top leaders will have to say, by saying, okay, on some of these issues, we were wrong. No harm in saying that. And then reaching out to the other side. That will begin reconciliation. An excellent point. Thank you.
I love the question in the sense that, again, reconciliation and truth go hand in hand. So again, I'll involve the crowd here in a bit. I'll read you a quote, and I'll give you a couple of prompts and tell me where you think this is from. The quote says, quote, "Sir, the reason is that the real criminals are so well protected because they very often sit in seats of authority. And unless through an act like this we are able to pull them down from their seats of authority, it will be of no use whatsoever to get hold of the smaller fry." Any guess of when this was said? This was said in the National Assembly of Pakistan. Bhutto? I hear Bhutto. Who else? One more shot. This was said in the National Assembly of Pakistan in 1949. 1949. And if you read the debates of this bill, the bill is titled, let me read you the title of this bill. The bill is titled Public and Representative Offices Disqualification Bill. So in 1949, now one thinks when you read this debate and you say, okay, 2 साल हुए हैं आज़ादी को, ऐसी कैसी करप्शन हो गई 2 साल में? मुल्क के पास तो हम तो सुनते थे कि थॉर्न लगा के पेपर पे काम हो जाता था, तो ऐसी कैसी लूटमार हो रही थी? नहीं. The truth was that there was an entrenched bureaucracy, and again, the truth was that the army that Pakistan inherited, over 35% of the army of the British India Army, with 25% of the resources, was an imperial army. Its sole job in the northwest was to protect the buffer zone of the Great Game into Afghanistan. And through that experience of independence very early on, we began seeing the gains towards authoritarianism in Pakistan that continue to this day. So the truth has to be a long process. And it has to acknowledge that civilians have consistently been in cahoots with the powers that be in Pakistan when it suits them, and oppose them when it didn't suit them. And that has continued, unfortunately, to this day. And when we start recognizing the truth, then to your point, Dr. Saab, the reconciliation becomes that much easier. Because you realize that if there is one institution that really seriously guards its turf, for example, when the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan, said, I have the right to appoint a DGISI, it is my right, it is under the law, my right. He was refused. The institution closed ranks and undermined his regime. That's just part of the facts of this age that we must recognize. The institution closed ranks. Did Parliament close ranks when it was attacked from the outside in? Did parliamentarians come together and said, outside forces, whether it's a superior judiciary or whether it's a military institution, coming and usurping our constitutional power, did we do something to come together irrespective of our very strong differences? The answer is no. So that reconciliation then leads to a stronger parliament. And again, this does not happen overnight and may make very many of us uncomfortable to sort of reach across the aisle and say, you know what, I kind of don't like you, but I want to strengthen parliament. Because we are only as strong as the institution that we hail and belong to. And I think that's been the biggest strategy. When we look at the truth and try to reconcile with that truth in the history of Pakistan, we will remember that Pakistani civilians have often, for various reasons, sometimes very good reasons, undermined each other. But they have to come together at this point in time. Otherwise, I will be here, Dr. Saab will be here, we will all be here 5 years down the road having the exact same conversation because Parliament failed to reconcile its differences within the institution.
I on that. Obviously, nobody would say that they don't want truth and reconciliation, but I think most important question in this regard is who will do it. And the system that Uzair just described and the court he presented, the power, the guilty may be in the seats of power themselves. So that's got the whole system hung up. So that becomes the main, objective, that which institution, how will this be achieved, and what are the examples in other parts of the world where this was done. More importantly, it's also an admission of a fault or acknowledging that we can do something wrong. People do something wrong, there was a fault. And unless somebody admits that, they can't progress to the future, they can't resolve their past, and thus cannot move to the future with confidence. So it's just not admitting your fault, and that helps you resolve it and move to the future. So I think that's very important, and Pakistan lack that capability as well. As in addition to building consensus, societally, I don't know if this is a curriculum change process or at the early education level. I was involved in the Middle East peace process some years back, and one of the aspects of that was actually helping people understand how to resolve different people, develop consensus. So it's no easy thing, but I think it's tied directly with this truth and reconciliation.
Thank you. Sure, please add.
The few couple of points. While we've heard of Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, we've heard a lot about it. We have no real information as to how it worked in the end and what was really achieved out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As far as I know, that South Africa has not been able to achieve much after the whole experience and is actually in very bad shape. Right. So while Truth and Reconciliation Commission is very attractive an idea, the second thing is that, as Arif Sahab has said, who's going to operationalize the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, right? And if, for instance, one side keeps on saying that we did this wrong, we did this thing wrong, we were wrong. As for instance, if we come back into the present time, Imran Khan is the single Pakistani politician in the entire history of Pakistan who has admitted so many of his mistakes. I was wrong, I didn't understand that, I didn't understand, I thought establishment wants to fight against the corruption, I didn't know this, Qazi Faizi sir, we shouldn't really have gone. There are more than a dozen examples. Not on one single instance, another side has also said that we were also wrong. So, well, in an informal way, while he had admitted, मैं गलत था, मैं इसमें भी गलत था, मैं इसमें भी गलत था. The argument that was shaped by Dawn, Tribune and all Pakistani media was इसके एक और U-turn हो गया, एक और अपनी गलती मान ली, एक और चीज़ गलत कर ली. तो निकला कुछ नहीं उसमें से, ठीक? The third problem is this, that we also have a crisis at hand. While we can also, debate the follies of the Mughal Empire, why Aurangzeb was so hostile to Hindus, while the temples really run down, hal usse niklega koi nahi. So we have to basically come back to where we are at the moment. Do we have any solutions to the crisis we face right now?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will take a break from our panel discussion for now. As you all know, today we were supposed to be joined by Mr. Imran Khan himself. But unfortunately, the circumstances currently do not allow that. Then we were supposed to be joined by Mr. Salman Ahmad. And exactly 3 hours before this event, he was also arrested. So now we are going to be joined by Mr. Rauf Hassan, who is the spokesperson for Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. And before even he is arrested, let's get him on live. So he can share his thoughts with us. And Assalamu alaikum, Rauf Bhai, Dr. Malik from Tampa, Florida. Welcome to the Tampa community.
Thank you very much. I'm sure this is good information to the party, sir, in addition to being its spokesperson.
Thank you. Rauf Bhai, we have our friends here, we have our fellow panelists here. So the way we have designed this event is, first we will request you to share your thoughts with the community here, and then the panelists will be asking you a few questions. Please go ahead, Rauf bhai.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Very kind of you to have invited me. And it's a painful time that we're passing through, all of us, whether we are in Pakistan or out of Pakistan. Through my years in this country, I have never experienced the level and ferocity of barbarity that unfortunately is being unleashed at the present times. I don't understand what's sparring it actually, when I really try to rationalize things, I really don't understand. But at a different level, I possibly can understand, because here is a person called Imran Khan, who in 75 years is just about the first individual who's honest, who's committed, and who has actually done something for this country, and wants to do a lot more. The system that we have perpetuated over 7.5 decades does not accept an individual of his kind, of his caliber, of his commitment, of his honesty. Consequently, the entire system, one way or the other, has been fighting against him ever since he was inducted into the corridors of power. That being another thing that he at times, in his poignant moments, says that he should never have taken responsibility unless he had the numbers in the National Assembly to bring about fundamental changes in the system which has governed this country in the last 7.5 decades. But anyway, that discussion for another time. Today was an even more painful day when Shah Mahmood Qureshi, we had an ethics committee meeting, and at that ethics committee meeting, we decided that it was important for him to address a press conference, because lots of things were happening in the last 1 week. In the southern Punjab, 5 of our devoted members were subjected to intense levels of barbarity. I can just cite one example. Senator Mr Lagai, one of the most committed people we had in the party, they had been pressurizing him to leave BChat, and he has been resisting very bravely. And then they got hold of his 17-year-old son, they stripped him naked, and they started torturing him in front of him. That was a bit much for a parent to take. And on telephone with our Secretary General, he gave in. Similar treatment, almost similar treatment was meted out to 4 other members of PTI from southern Punjab. And this is a process which has been repeated. In Sialkot, Usman Jah, an MNA, and another very important member of the family of PTI. His family, entire family, his mother, his sisters, his wife, children were virtually thrown out on the street at midnight. And their house was locked, their factory was closed, and they had nowhere to go. This happened last night. I can just go on recounting experiences, which with each being worse than the previous one. So they're rising to worse levels of atrocities, and there does not seem to be an end to this sequence of things, in the foreseeable future. What they want, and I wrote an article to a weekly piece actually last Friday, and today it was published in Jan, but in the news, I said the problem is that they did not quite understand that there was a species of humans other than the Sharifs and Zardaris that they have known, and that species of humans possibly is symbolized by the person of Imran Khan. So once they removed him, they thought that he was going to just melt away into one of those foreign countries, and then, wait out this time to be recalled again to another state before that. I said that is where they went wrong. He's a man of a different battle, and he's a person who's not going to be given, he's not going to lead this country. They were not prepared for this. This is a challenge, that they never thought they will face, they will confront. But here is a challenge, which is there, present for them, and they are finding it, they're finding it very difficult, almost impossible to confront the challenge. They were never contented with the possibility of this kind. So that to me is the crux of the problem. So the tools that they have chosen to do it are the tools of fascism. In Urdu language, it's called Jabr and Zulm, and this is what they're trying, and more people are being forced out of the party. But fortunately, before Khan was taken in, he had set in motion mechanisms around the party. He had set a few committees, the Apex Committee, comprises a few people, and the core committee, which had a larger number of people in. So this was the mechanism that she put together to run the party in his absence. And the frustration for the powers that be is that while, in spite of the fact that they're taken in Khan, the party is still functioning. And this is the current reason of their mounting frustration. Consequently, we see them getting more and more ferocious and more ferocious about handling PTI and its workers and leaders. I see the sequence of things will continue until and unless there is some radical change that occurs, either from within the institution or the circumstances, in this part of the world change so drastically that they come under pressure and they think in terms of changing their approach and their attitudes. If we want to speak of the near future, I do not see any of these things happening, and so I see a phase where such a treatment will continue. PTI people will have to take in this kind of treatment. PTI will have to continue weathering this kind of treatment. But let me assure you, all of you friends here, that we are not just prepared. Each day that passes solidifies our resolve further, our commitment further, and we are totally committed to getting Khan out. Obviously, it's going to be a long and arduous legal battle. They're not going to let him out because even if on the 22nd, when the case comes up for hearing before the Islamabad High Court, he gets a bail. There are 9 other cases where bails have been cancelled. So, potentially speaking, he could be arrested each of those 9 cases. So this is what we see, that he will be bailed out in one case, but he will be hauled up in another, and another, and another, and another. This process is likely to continue for a considerable period of time. Either there is a change of mindset or there is a public upsurge. Let me share it with you that at the core committee level and at the apex committee level, we are currently kind of debating whether the policy of flash protests, which means that a smaller number of people getting together for a limited period of time, and when they see the police arriving at the scene, they just melt away. And this is what Khan said before he was taken, and he said, I do not want any of you to be arrested. So, he is the one who projected the idea of flash protests. But at the apex committee level, at the core committee level, we started debating the possibility of transitioning from flash protests to mass, to call for mass protests. We were still debating it when Shah Mahmood Qureshi was taken in today. But we should continue doing this, and we're trying to meet Khan Sahib in jail. In fact, I have been struggling to meet him because he asked for me and a couple of other people to meet him. And we will seek his guidance and his approval. So I see a possibility, to build pressure on the powers that be. I think it's important that people step out in large numbers. So, from a strategic point of view, we may in due course of time move from flash protests to call for mass protests. But that, of course, will not happen without a formal consent of the chairman. And the most important hindrance to that is that we are not being permitted. He has little access to his lawyers. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, he has received only 2 visits from only one of his lawyers. Although the Islamabad High Court had permitted that he should be allowed to meet his legal team, he should be allowed to meet his family, he should be allowed to meet his party people whom he wants to meet. But unfortunately, the prison authorities have only allowed one lawyer to meet him on 2 different occasions. And then, of course, his wife, Kosha Bibi, has met him twice. But that is all that he has been able to access in terms of meeting his friends. So, we're still trying, I moved a petition in the High Court that I should be allowed to meet him. So let's see whether it takes a week or a month or even longer. So important thing is that, we are currently thinking in terms of change of strategy, but we are also struggling to meet him so that we can get his formal approval. So pressure from within the institution, which I see will happen in due course of time, and then pressure that we can mount in terms of electing people out in the streets, And I think maybe a combination of it at some point in time would do the trick, while these people will agree to come to the table and initiate a dialogue to transition the country to where it should be, a democratic rule and holding of elections. In the current dispensation, we have little hope that elections are going to be held anytime soon. This technocratic setup, which has been inducted, I am very certain that this is a long night of oppression. This reflects a long night of oppression. So there has to be pressure, and pressure would only be generated either from within the institution or by getting people out of the street. So we're working on the latter, and I hope that in about 2 to 4 weeks' time, you will see a change of approach, a change of strategy. You will possibly see people out of the streets in large numbers, and we should then start building the pressure on the powers that be, to come to the table, which can potentially pave the way for the voting elections at some time in the future. I just had this much to say, and in case there's any question, any query, I'm here to respond to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody, you go ahead.
To your question to the
Yes.
Rosab, this is Dr. Mueed Izada, if you can hear me.
I can hear and clear Mueed.
Rosab, many people feel, this is a persistent debate, not only here, but across Pakistan, that whatever is happening in Pakistan is not necessarily new, and it has always been happening the same. So, this is how Nawaz was removed, this is how others were removed. So what is so special about what's happening in Pakistan? What's your response to that?
Well, Nawaz was removed, yes, of course. First of all, I can see the point that you're making. Yes, in the last 75 years, we have seen a sequence of such things happening, and I was in London. I'm a senior fellow at the King's College also. So I was invited to deliver make a presentation at IISS there. And my thesis there was that, Pakistan has been ruled for all the 7.5 decades that it has been there as a so-called independent country by the military, either directly through martial law regimes or by anointing its proxies, in various positions of power in the government. What is different is that, in the past, you had the Sharifs, you had the Zardaris, you had the other anointed ones. Basically, there was one feature that was common to all of them. They were corrupt to the core, and they did nothing for the country. They only did, whatever they did was for their own advancement and for their own benefit, etc. What is different is that we had a leader basically who, even when he was out of power, did so much for the country. I am a cancer survivor, and I know exactly what a cancer hospital means in this country, or for that matter at the Namal University, or other things that he was working on. So he was the first instance of a leader who actually did something for Pakistan before he came into power. And two, he wanted to bring everybody under the count of law. And this was not acceptable to those who had actually managed the country from behind the scenes, the ones who always pulled the strings. And that is the reason why within the first 6 months, we know it now, we did not know it when we were running the government, in the government. We know that within the first 6 months, the powers that he had actually thwarted all the initiatives, that he took with regard to bringing everybody, the rich and the powerful, the weak and the people, everybody under the diktat of law. So example, everybody knows who had that medical certificate made. When we were there as part of the cabinet, we did not know. We kept guessing. How did it happen? But we now know who did it. We now know why the courts were not hearing the accountability cases against the Sharifs and the Zardaris and the court. So what was new was that there was a person who was different, who wanted Pakistan to become genuinely independent and exercise his independence for formulating policies that were to its benefit and not just to the benefit of a few individuals. And this is why they moved quickly. They first thwarted all that he was trying to undertake. Within the first 6 months, the conspiracy had started. And it took another 2.5 years or so, for him to be removed ultimately. So yes, the powers are the same, the mindset is the same, but there was a different kind of person, and that is the reason they are being so vicious about it. That is why they're not even willing to sit across and talk to him, because they definitely do not want him to come back. They were willing to let creeps and criminals come back. The Sharifs and the Zardaris come back. But Khan is a different person. Khan is a person who would sit across and not compromise with them. Here is a person they find difficult to deal with, to handle, to overcome, to overpower. He's a different breed of person. And this is the reason, this is different.
Okay.
And, you know, that possibly would make
I will request my panelist and Rauf Hassan Bhai to please keep the question and the answer a little short, because we are running short of time here. We still have several speakers who have to give speeches also. Thank you. Hassan Bhai, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rauf. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for your comments. I have a question as regards any support that you are receiving from the human rights organizations and other political parties. Can you share anything that you have received from other parties which talk a lot about human rights? Have they shown any solidarity? Have they reached out to the PTI on a matter of principle that these unlawful, illegal arrests should stop? And what is the response of the human rights organizations in Pakistan so far? Some of those are very prominent. Any thoughts you can share with that? Thank you.
Silence, deafening silence from the political parties, from the human rights organizations. So let me put it this way: the ones who conspired to kick him out cannot come together to save his skin. Such are the way things are happening in this country. I have personally spoken to HRCP, for example, and so many other so-called human rights bodies in this country. 3 days ago, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, myself, and Senator Ali Zafar, we called on, we were invited to a breakfast meeting, by the Australian High Commissioner, and when there were 8 other ambassadors and High Commissioners. The American ambassador was there, the British High Commissioner was there, the EU ambassador was there, the Canadian High Commissioner, and some others, 8 or 9 of them were there. And we were there for about an hour and a half, and we discussed, and we were struck by the lack of empathy displayed by those people. In spite of the fact that we told them exactly what was happening to our people, what was happening to Khan Saab, at that time. We were struck by the lack of empathy, crassness. So those people who are responsible for having him kicked out will not come together, sir, to get him back into power. That, unfortunately, is the state at this point, sir.
Next. Uzair Yunus. You're good. Dr. Kamran? Okay. So, Rauf Hassan Bhai, we really appreciate your time. Thank you. So now we will proceed. We will just to make sure here, I know we all get emotional, myself included. I would like to clarify one thing here, that we are all civilized and educated people. We do not hate anyone. We love Pakistan. We love all the institutions of Pakistan. We love the armed forces of Pakistan. If we criticize 1 or 2 generals who are at the top, making wrong decisions for the country, that is our right. If, however, it is considered a sin to criticize Chief of Army Staff, please provide us the list of the Chief of Army Staffs that we cannot criticize, and then make sure to put the name of General Yahya Khan in that list.
It's like the gentleman before you made the suggestion of 1 million people coming outside the out of jail is also unrealistic, and that is why when we need to find solutions, we need to understand history, psychology, and other issues. Many Pakistanis have cited the 2016 failed Turkish coup attempt, not realizing this thing that AK Party was prepared for it, and they had a massive organizational capability and structure. And they were tipped off by the Russian intelligence that something is about to happen. So Erdogan had already called people for special prayers in the mosques. There were 400,000 mosques in and around Istanbul. So when the final moment came and Erdogan was able to speak through CNN in Turkey, the CNN, those people came out, and then they had paramilitaries which were loyal to the paramilitary. So in Pakistan, the Pakistani military dominates the police, the district management group, every paramilitary, rangers and everything. Pakistani people are very helpless. So we need to basically find out what are the other political options. That is why the role of the North American diaspora and also the British and European, like people who are in Brussels, Geneva and other places is very, very important. And sometimes it also happens that people give you explanations and excuses what are not true at all.